Welcome to Breaking Bread. Join us as we talk about leadership and building different skills. Do stay connected with us on social media. We're on Instagram at Breaking Bread USA and on Facebook, Breaking Bread Nonprofit. Today, we're excited to welcome Joe Wilson Jr., Director of Art, Culture, and Tourism for the City of Providence. Well, hello, Joe.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. It's good to see you.
It's so good to see you. Thank you so much for your time, your energy. I'm so excited. This is part of our Breaking Bread leadership conversations. And it would have been amazing if you and I could have been seated with some wonderful seafood boil.
Oh, yes.
Or even the New England version. I don't know that you could compare the two.
Lobster boil.
Lobster boil. See, that's Breaking Bread. But we are making the most of what we lack in seafood boil. We more than make up in energy and love.
Absolutely. It's a great way to end the week.
There
talking
you go. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. We'd love to get started by just getting to know you. And so please tell us a little bit about what it is that you do. And we know it is a lot, but tell us a little bit about your role, please, Joe.
Well, again, I'm Joe Wilson Jr., and I am the Director of Art, Culture, and Tourism for the City of Providence. Many folks maybe recognize me from the fact that for 30 years of my life, I was an actor and director in the American Theater. For 20 years, I was a part of the resident acting company at Trinity Rep. And I am now in my third year of being the director of this department, which is 20 years old. And the mission of this department is really to ensure the vibrancy of our creative capital in every way that means, whether it be through supporting small 501c3s and artists through grants. We manage a large public art portfolio, and we also shepherd new public art and commemorative art into public space. We produce signature events, whether it's PVD Fest or our Christmas tree lighting or our 4th of July celebration or Pops in the Parks. That's ACT. We also have several signature placekeeping initiatives through the Providence Commemoration Lab, Broad Street Stories. We also, one of the major pieces of our portfolio is we permit every special event and film that takes place here in the city of Providence. And so there's a scope of work that we do. More importantly, I think it's my job as a leader of this department. And I think it's why the mayor hired me, was to be able to use my skills as a storyteller coming from the theater to be able to help tell the story of Providence and why this city is so dynamic. I'm really just so grateful for his confidence in me. And I've loved every minute of celebrating, championing, cheerleading my adoptive home. I've been here now for over 20 years. Yeah.
Same here. That's funny. Actually, I love what you said about sharing stories. And I think that might have been how you and I first connected. But I was listening to you share just some of the highlights and I realized, oh yeah, that's them. Oh yeah, that's them. Oh my gosh, they have a pretty full dance card over here. So thank you for everything, because I do believe the creative capital is what draws a lot of us and keeps us here. So this is actually the year that I can say I've spent exactly half my life in Rhode Island. The first half was spent in India, where I was born and raised. But I love everything that Providence and Rhode Island have to offer. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. It's a beautiful city. I love it here. And I was born and raised in the city of New Orleans. And what's so extraordinary about being now in Providence is I often say that Providence reminds me of New Orleans. And people are like, what are you talking about? They seem like such different cities. But how they are alike is that obviously we have two cities that are chock full of makers and creatives and artists. And there's a grittiness to both of our cities. There's a can-do spirit to both of our cities. It's one thing that I think makes New Orleans different from Providence is New Orleans has a completely unapologetic way that it sort of exists in the world. And, we're a little different up here in the Northeast. We're a little bit more buttoned up, and, we care sometimes a little bit too much about what people think about us. But also what makes the city a lot like New Orleans is it's such a diverse city.
Yes.
It's such a melting pot of culture. And you see that in the people. You see that in our nonprofits.
Yeah.
You see that in our food. You hear it in our music.
Yeah.
It's a city that borrows and reimagines and folds in upon itself time and time again. And it's really great being in a place and being able to talk about those things and remind us of those things, give us confidence about who we are as a city, to stop, understanding our existence as a stop on our way to Boston from New York or vice versa, that we are a place that people should stop and spend some time, that we're not just a pass-through city.
Yeah, we are the destination.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I love that. And I think to your point, you feel it. Certain things you feel, well, and taste, which is what Breaking Bread is all about, is supporting, all of the ways in which people come together. So I'd love to zoom in on something that you shared, which is you made quite a career transition. And one of the things that we're hoping to do is, through these leadership conversations, provide some insight, provide some inspiration, provide some advice for individuals who are looking to grow their careers. Change can be very hard. Change can be very hard. So would love to hear how you navigated from your career in theater to your current role.
That's a really great question. And actually, you remind me, right now I'm thinking about my father. I'm thinking about my father because, I grew up in a family where I watched my parents grow up. For 10 years, I was the only child. And I watched my family both, my mom got pregnant with me. They both dropped out of college. They both began sort of entry-level positions. My dad worked in a can company. My mother worked as a teller in a bank. And I watched them evolve. I watched them go back to school. I watched my dad then go to law school. He worked in a can company, then worked at Xerox fixing copy machines, then decided he wanted to be a lawyer. And then, 15, 20 years before he passed, he was called to the ministry to become a Methodist minister. My mom made the same kind of trajectory. They were always trying to better themselves, always trying to learn, always trying to be an example to me about, not only continuing to strive, but to also take risks and try something different. And so this idea of me trying something different started when I was in college, because my degree from the University of Notre Dame is in government political science. And I had every intention of going to law school. And I took an acting class in the second semester of my junior year of college so I wouldn't mess up my GPA. And it ended up, it changed my life. And then so rather than go to law school, and I'd been accepted into 5 law schools, I decided to go to acting school, which my parents had, as you can probably imagine, a fit. I did it because I did it not knowing exactly why I was doing it or what would be or what would happen with my career or what would the results be. I did it because of how I knew making art made me feel. And I think that's part of, I would say, made me a pretty decent actor and director, is I've always sort of gone on instinct, and I've been just confident enough to trust that instinct because it usually has led me in the right direction. So that's the first impulse around kind of career change. Fast forwarding to this job, COVID was a very difficult time for me as an artist. And not only as an artist making art, but also as a teaching artist, where I worked as a professor of the practice at Wheaton College in Massachusetts. And so having to transition from teaching in person to now teaching an acting class online. And, basically we weren't performing at that time. And so it was a really difficult time for me. Not to mention we were going through yet another social justice reckoning at that time. And so while the industry was in shambles, I felt like my career was something I didn't quite recognize. I was struggling to find a sense of place and to understand the new reality where we were as a result of the pandemic. And the mayor of Providence asked me to join his new administration. And again, that same impulse of when I decided to go to graduate school in acting, he asked me literally one evening when we were together, and I immediately said to him, okay, my imposter syndrome is taking over. I have to think about it. And the next day I called him back and said, well, we set up a meeting. And at that meeting, which was like a week later, I said, I accept the position. And that was without knowing a lot about what I was walking into, but I just felt like it was something that I had to do.
Yep.
It was a place that I could have more impact on the sector as a whole. And again, just going with my initial sort of way that I move. One of the ways I move through the world is trusting my instinct, and I think it was time. It was time. It was time for me to use my voice as an artist with all that I've been through. I've been a gig economy worker. I have worked in every part of the sector. I have made art for the majority of my life. And also what my art making gave me the opportunity has been to serve and to advocate, to sometimes get myself into trouble in doing so, because artists by nature are disruptors. And so it just seemed like the perfect opportunity for me at this point in my life.
That's great. I love what you said about you had the imposter syndrome, but you still overcame it and you realized, hey, there is an impact that I can make. Would you say that was almost your why? Is it fair to say that, or is there more to your why? Because I love understanding the why behind why people do what they do. And you made this incredible transition because there were so many transferable skills that you could apply, which I have to admit, ordinarily people might not think that you can do that. So I think there's a lot we can learn from this and sort of, break it apart and say there's, as you said, to serve, to advocate, to lean into emotion, which the best leaders do. To lean into sort of your whole brain, if you will, because of course there's, and I've heard you spit out data at the same time. So there's the creative part, there's the data part. I'll bring it all back in because to me, ultimately, all of that falls in place if your why is really strong.
Akanksha, you, it's like you've been reading my journal because for a long time with my artistry, I always felt like something was missing. And I loved making art. I loved being in the theater. But what frustrated me often was my lack of license and agency sometimes, that I felt like I was a part of a larger cog machine that I had no control over what happened to me. Especially, you watch the social justice reckoning during COVID. A lot of that involved behavior and practices in the American theater and film. I often tell my acting students this. It's like, the character that we become is unfortunately a result of being tooed to death. T-O-O. You're too short, you're too fat, you're too black, you're too white, you're too this, you're too that. And that was the nature of my career a lot in this business. But you get to the why. Why I love that question around the why is, again, thinking about my training as an actor. That's one of the first things we teach, and I was taught how to do, is ask the question why. And I'll give you an example. Every character, every person, you, me, we're characters and characters in plays. We have a thing called an objective. There's something that we want. And when you're reading a play and when you're interrogating a character, you always ask the question, what is my objective? I have an objective in a scene, right? From scene to scene, I may have different objectives. And as people, our lives are composed of hundreds of scenes over the course of a day and over a week. So we can have different objectives, but ultimately we have a super objective. And how we get at the objective is always asking the question, why? My young acting students I'll say, what's your objective as a character? And they'll say, to leave the room. And I would say, no, if you left the room, the play is over. But that's not your objective. Why are you leaving the room? Because I want them to follow me. Now we're getting at, that's an action to make someone feel a certain way so you can get what you want from them, which is ultimately your objective. So in asking a question of why, I've been asking that question both in my work as a part of my practice, but also asking the question of Joe. And what I know is Joe has always been a justice seeker. Like, I just always want, things outrage me and I want to do something about it. I want to help people. I think that's kind of what I felt missing sometimes from my work, that I didn't feel like I had the capacity or the opportunity or the bandwidth sometimes to even think outside of just trying to pay my rent and finding the next job. And I've lived in several cities, and a play is over, then I'm on to the next job, meeting brand new people. And so the why for me is I love community. The why for me is I love engaging in community. The why for me is I want to be able to use my artistry as an advocate, an activist. And the why for me is because, I feel like I do have a gift as a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
The why ultimately is I have a deep understanding of the value of art and culture, and that it's not just arts for art's sake, but arts and culture and food and music, that is at the center of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we communicate with each other. It's how we express ourselves. But not just that. It also drives economies. It's at the center of many economies, especially when you think about a place like Providence. That it's not just a feel-good story about the arts and culture. They're a pathway to opportunity. Arts and culture are a pathway to opportunity. Arts and culture provide lots of transferable skills. So much of my actor training now, I had no idea that it actually is integral in terms of my understanding of leadership and how to build consensus and how to create a sense of trust, psychological safety,
Yes.
Collaboration, putting myself in somebody else's shoes, always living in this space of loving the iterative, meaning what if, why, what if, asking questions, not assuming we have the answer, right? And so all of that is a part of actor training, and all of that's a part of this job. And I feel just so blessed to be able to exercise that in this very public space, in this form of public service.
Yeah. I have so many thoughts about what you said, so I'm trying to dissect them all together. But I love, love, love the fact that you spoke about agency, and it is, when you know that you have this passion, you have this energy, you have the talent, and to be able to channel that in a direction, to make an impact, to make a difference, to bring the right stories to the forefront. So I appreciate that. I really want to go back to something you said, Joe, about, and I'll use a broad term here because restaurants, hotels, theater, arts, all of that together, as you said, is doing two incredible things. Number one, bringing people together. The way we are sitting, having this incredible conversation, food does that, art does that, theater does that. But then it's also the huge economic impact.
Absolutely. We recently completed a Life at Night study, which was a recommendation of our department's second 10-year cultural plan, because the Department of Art, Culture, and Tourism celebrated its 20th anniversary last year. And when we got back the numbers of the sector, they were absolutely staggering. Within the city of Providence, first of all, some high-level information that came out of that study. This city of Providence is as international as Los Angeles. Wow. This city of Providence per capita has more Life at Night businesses per capita than New York City. We have more students in this city than in Philadelphia. This is a $990 million sector, our Life at Night sector here in the city of Providence. And so that's a lot of transactions, right? But speaking about transaction, for the longest time, I had a very transactional relationship with my art form, because people often have a very transactional relationship with us as artists, as creatives, as people in the hospitality sector. We're there to do a thing, right, to provide a service. And I had that same kind of transactional relationship with my art form. When was I going to be on Broadway? When was I going to be nominated for a Tony? Would I ever get to LA and do the movie thing and do movies? Never had interested in doing movies. Didn't think I was very good at it. I did get to Broadway twice, was never nominated for a Tony. But what I've come to understand about my craft, and Providence taught me this, actors in this town taught me this, because you have so many actors in this town who, they're not just acting, they're working for nonprofits, they're serving on boards, they're doing all kinds of things within the community. This community taught me taught me how not to have a transactional relationship to my art form, but to understand that my art form has transformative power. And the more that I would think about anybody in this creative sector, it's like, I've waited my fair share of tables and I've tended my fair share of bars. But when I made my most money at a bar and develop the most, consistent customer base and people coming in time and time again when Joe was working to pour them their drinks, it was not because I had a transactional relationship with them. It was because they came in and they liked to talk to me.
Right.
They came in and they saw me looking them in the eye and engaging with them. And that is a skill. And of course, sometimes I was too, as we say in the business, in the weeds, to engage in that way.
Yeah.
But what made, I think, me good in the sector, whether it be, like I said, waiting tables, being behind a bar, pouring a drink, or in my own craft is being able to be in a moment, look someone in the eye and mean it when I say, how are you doing?
Yeah.
What can I do to help you? And so once I began to understand to not have a transactional relationship to the work, it completely changed my life. And I think that allowed me to think bigger and wider about what I could do, about the possibility of my life as an artist.
Mm. That is a big thing, isn't it? To be able to make that connection. That's what brought me into the industry when I started with my, first internship back in the day with hotels was no 2 days are the same. And you do have two very different muscles that you're using, the ability to genuinely connect, genuinely. You shared the journey of your parents and my parents as well, very genuine. And one thing that I learned from my father early on was he would actually listen. And it was interesting because I think I might have been a preteen or a teen, and one of my friends said, hey, something really funny, your father will ask a question and most adults will just kind of like walk away. Your father actually is interested in what I have to say. And for a child to have made that observation, it stuck with me for a long time because it wasn't just this sort of, hey, how's it going? How's it going? Great. How's it going? But actually listening. And I think that's what people don't realize is a big muscle group that a lot of folks in this industry are using. They are genuinely interested in how your day has been or what they can do to make your day better. And whether it's that little latte art or whether it's, making a child happy by adding something to their plate or whatever that case may be, right? It's always those little things which they're taking the time to do, even if they are in the weeds. And when you think about how much that brings humanity together, let's face it, we're all spending a lot of time on our phones. And I don't think we can change that through this one conversation. But I do think that when people sit down and spend time together, you can connect in different ways.
Speaking of transferable skills from my life as an artist and now in thinking of being a leader in this department, I spent a lot of money on becoming or learning how to act. And one of the most difficult lessons in learning how to act is learning how to listen. What makes it really hard to listen in acting is because you know how the play's going to end. I know my lines. I know what I'm going to say. I know what you're going to say. And we tend then, especially in longer runs of a play, take that for granted. And we stop listening. And that's when, things can get a little wonky. But I literally was taught how to listen, how to recreate listening, even though you know how the story is going to end. And so I often find myself in moments when I want to take things for granted in this job, when I've had a rough day, when I have people yelling at me, when I have, constituents complaining about this or that, trying not to take these experiences for granted and employing some of those techniques that I learned as an actor in terms of how to listen as though I have never been in this situation, how to listen as though I've never heard this story, how to listen as though, I'm not tired of this is the 10th person that's been yelling at me today about something that's happening in community, or a bar is too loud, or the noise was too much, or this and that and the other, but really learning how to listen each time as though it were the first time. And that's about like not taking any moment for granted. And that then leads into this whole thing about acting. It's about being in the moment, being present. We have to be present. And it's especially important when, acting can at times be even dangerous.
Yes.
Depending on the play that we're in, if it's a musical, there's always a lot going on. By the number of injuries I've had in the American theater, I can attest to the fact that, it's difficult work. But so being present and listening is also about keeping you and your partner safe. And so there's so many of those stories and anecdotes I can tell in terms of what I learned to be in the theater.
Right.
And how that has come full circle to me now as a leader in the Department of Art, Culture, and Tourism.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said about being in the moment. I think some of the best leaders that I've seen are in the moment. They're paying attention. And that's where you're able to then draw patterns, right? Because a lot of times as a leader, you have to make decisions with very little information. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had all the data and all the behaviors and all the information in front of us? But that's not always possible as a leader. So if it's only if you've been really tuned in and paying attention that you can do that. But I was thinking on a sillier note, I was thinking of what you said, and I said, if Joe can use his transferable skills from acting to leadership, can I do it the other way around? Do I finally have a career in Bollywood that I've always dreamt of? No, I'm kidding.
Absolutely. Well, that's interesting you said that. You joke. But what you speak of, actually, and you remind me of another thing that is sort of a conflict with me as a person versus what I decided to do with my life as an actor and then making these changes in my career is I am a horribly risk-averse person.
No.
Horribly. I love safety. I love comfort. I am risk-averse. I'm actually an introvert. I mean, people say, Joe, come on, I see you on stage and, oh, come on. But when I go to a party, I'm the guy in the corner having one conversation with a cocktail. And, I'm actually very introverted and I'm very risk-averse. And I think it comes from the fact that, obviously, in New Orleans, I grew up as a preacher's kid before. I mean, I grew up in a fairly religious family, and I was taught to be afraid of everything, and I'm still working through that in my adult life of not being afraid of everything. But what I guess the piece of me that allowed me to break through that sense of risk or being afraid of taking a risk is again my strong sense of just my instinct and intuition that, and every time I've listened to it, I honestly have not been led astray. There's something that trusting that I've always found those safe spaces, found those places of community, found actually what I was indeed looking for by getting out of my own way. Am I still as risk averse as I always have been? And I've done some crazy stuff too. I remember being at the University of Notre Dame and I ended up participating with a bunch of students. And this is the activism piece. So even while I was learning how to be an actor or kind of understanding my life potentially as an actor, I had these trigger experiences within advocacy and activism that were layered within my life. And going back to Notre Dame, there was one moment when about 500 of us shut down the Golden Dome one day because we, over the course of a semester, had developed a list of demands in support of students of color on campus. I'm happy to say when my brother went back to Notre Dame 10 years later, many of those things that we advocated for were there. So there were all that you triggered this for me with those little pieces, those little moments, those little nuggets of information that can actually help us understand our journey forward and piece it all together. We may not understand it in the moment, but once we piece those things together, we say, oh, now it all makes sense. It all makes sense.
They make you who you are.
That's exactly right. Yeah. A tapestry, a mosaic, so to speak.
Yeah. I wonder about that. I am an extrovert. I get my energy from people. Watch, after this conversation, I will be jumping off the walls and bouncing down with excitement because I find joy and energy through people. But at the same time, I'm analytical. And I think that part of self-awareness is probably what helps you lean into your instinct and say, that's it right there. And I think sometimes people don't realize that is something you have to build as well. It's not just your art or your craft or whether it is law or culinary or theater or whatever it might be, right? It's also these sort of instincts that you have to build up as a leader, as a performer, as a chef. and know, tune into yourself.
Self-awareness is critical. I think about my work as an artist, because I'm also thinking about just even spatial awareness. My God, the number of times that I had to learn, even when I was behind a crowded bar or in a crowded restaurant, about being spatially aware. You could turn around in one instant and you're bumping into a person who's carrying a tray of drinks, my spatial and self-awareness came directly from my training as an actor. You always have to be aware, reading a room.
Yeah.
But not only reading a room and understanding it in terms of how it's making you feel or what you're feeling, what you're hearing, what you're seeing, but it's also thinking of your body as it listens in different ways. We don't listen just by what we hear. We listen 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 by what we hear. All of those ways are ways that we are engaged in the world. And so kind of having a holistic understanding of my body, being self-aware, like all of that was, very much part of my training as an artist, and I've had to employ in every aspect of my life as an adult.
I didn't realize that. I'm listening to you and I'm realizing that, but I would joke that you can tell folks from the way they're standing. You can tell if someone's military, or you can tell if someone's from hospitality from the way that they're standing, because no movement is going wasted. But I think that, and now I'm realizing that's probably true in theater as well.
Because movement gives us information. And in storytelling, it's not just a matter of what you're saying, not the words you're using, but it's also the flick of, the bat of an eye or the movement of a hand. So much of how we use our bodies tells us a lot about who we are. And so we have to be intentional about that when we're crafting character in theater. Because, if I may be sending mixed signals about who my character actually is to an audience based upon me not understanding, how to fully use my body and how not to use my body, how we as people, even our bodies betray us oftentimes because of what we're feeling and what we're sensing, or fear or love or infatuation, or our bodies are a complicated thing. And so learning how to use it, learning how to use it is a very important part of this work as well.
I remember in one of my prior roles, we were trying to build some service excellence into a unit, and great team, really genuine. The facility needed a little bit of renovation, so it was hard. But we were working through some standards, and I remember working with a lady who I deeply admired, and who was one of my mentors. And she said, "We'll figure out the standards. That'll be fine. But you know what? They're smiling with their eyes. The heart is already here. This team is smiling with their eyes." And I'll never forget what she said. Oh my gosh. I could sit here forever. But you have plans and promises, and I believe we have like 7,000 inches of snow coming our way.
We do. We'll be okay.
We'll be okay. There is so much power in everything that you've shared, whether it's your story or knowing how to lean into your instincts, or being when to sort of lean into the risk and when to go away from risk. But I really, really appreciate all that you shared today, Joe. Any parting words of wisdom for our growing Breaking Bread population?
Words of wisdom. I would just say that I'm a work in progress. I'm continuing to learn how to listen. I'm continuing to learn how to be in the moment. And I'm continuing to understand that all around me, there always are opportunities. If I am just in the moment and I'm present and I'm listening and I remain inquisitive, always asking questions, always asking why, because why will ultimately lead to me understanding truly what I want and what will make me happy. And I'm just so grateful that I have had a career as an artist, and it's evolved from me not even knowing why I was in the room, apart from how it made me feel, to now understanding my artistry and creativity as a tool, as a pathway for both building community,
Mm-hmm.
but also to advocate for equity and justice, understanding that art, we can have a transactional relationship to it. We purchase a ticket, we buy a piece of art. I'm dating myself. You buy an album. Nobody buys an album. A streaming service. So that's all those transactional ways and relationships, and that's fine. I mean, because that helps to pay the bills. But also knowing that art making and creativity has a transformative power, and so and the power of folks who inhabit the sector, that you celebrate with your work and celebrate through breaking bread. It's like, we are on, I truly believe, on the front lines of creating experiences for people and actually giving people an opportunity to stop and to be in community and to enjoy a thing and share a thing, giving us a moment to look up from those screens and look in someone's eye. And if it's just about, doesn't this taste great? Or isn't this a wonderful space? That I think we are all the sector on the front lines of showing and helping us be more human, be continuing to be more human, to be more engaged with each other and the world around us. And that is truly, whether you believe in God, that's God's work. That's holy work. That's mission-driven work when you're actually reminding people how to be with each other. And at the same time, reminding ourselves as individuals how to be with other people. And I think all of that allows us to have better relationships with ourselves. And so I guess my main thing is just, man, how I love this sector, how I love all of the folks out there who are creating experiences for people, or helping people to create their own experiences, or helping people to dream and imagine. And I'm just so happy that also now we are getting better and better about quantifying the power of our sector and advocating for our sector and letting folks know that it's not a matter of if you can afford to have arts and culture. The question is, can you afford not to? On behalf, so I guess that's how I would. That's great. That's my parting shot.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I know folks will be really thinking about their why and also appreciating the love and the gratitude towards the incredible folks who are at the center of all of our experiences. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.